So Vanessa, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But
thank you, Dr. Nick. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
before we go into the future, Vanessa, can you tell us a little bit about your own backgrounds? Where did you grow up?
Dr. Nick, I actually grew up in Durban. I'm from KwaZulu-Natal, and I was born in one of the suburbs in Durban called Chatsworth. I grew up in the late 1960s. Interestingly enough, when I was born, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, so one could say it was a landmark birth of mine. Yeah, I was born in the late 1960s, so I'm a child of the apartheid era. And my hometown was the base for me to complete my schooling, education, and my undergrad studies, and also led me to my first job, which was in government. I have worked in private sector before as a student, etc. But
before we go into your career, can you please tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
Growing up as a little girl, I always saw myself as an inventor. I really wanted to be an innovator of gadgets that would make one's life easy. So I would look at simple things, whether it was just applying butter on the toast in the morning or putting the kettle on. I'd look at gadgets and I think there must be a shorter, easier way to do this and to make our lives easy. Because I'm a dreamer by heart, I also envisioned myself to be a great author one day, and I really wanted to be an author of children's books and nonfiction books. So that's what I used to dream as a little girl.
Well, tell us, who inspired you in your early days?
Dr. Nick, in my early days, growing up in a family with 3 brothers, the greatest source of inspiration I got was from my home and my family, my parents. My father largely was instrumental in influencing me and inspiring me, and all of us, all my siblings as well, with regards to reading. And I think that's where I got that love for gadgets from. He would subscribe to Reader's Digest and these encyclopedias where you could overlay, say, the parts of an engine of a car, and as you turn a page, different layers, you're stripping that car. So I got that excitement for gadgets from my dad and his love for and his thirst for knowledge. But my mother as well. Sorry, Dr. Nick, if I could just add here.
Sure.
The influence from both my parents was, my dad was on the academic side, but my mom was on this organizational, set a target, have a plan, time schedules and discipline. I got that from my mom, Dr. Nick.
Okay, and tell us, looking back over your career, Vanessa, would you say there was a major turning point?
Yes, there was. My major turning point came when I got an opportunity to leave the shores of South Africa for the very first time to take an international trip, when I got chosen as an ambassador of South Africa to represent South Africa in a training program hosted by the Ministry of Singapore. And there were over 30 countries that were represented, and we needed to have made a submission on some projects that we were dealing with. And I was successful in the selection. And to me, that privilege of leaving the suburbs that I grew up in, and we didn't grow up with any of the privileges. It was a very hard and tough life. For me, that was quite a turning point, and quite an experience, because I rubbed shoulders with colleagues that worked in other countries. You know what was interesting for me, Dr. Nick, was that it didn't matter whether you were first world or they referred to South Africa as a third world country back then. Do you know what was the common thing that really inspired me and impacted me? Was that all civil servants or public servants bleat and moan about the same thing. We all have a common language called complainers in government. And it was quite refreshing to know that in South Africa as well, we really kept our own when it came to that experience. So that was quite a turning point for me.
Okay, okay. Now, what would you say is driving you today?
Being, well, I'm a pioneer in environmental management, and the portfolio that I hold is an environmental manager. So I'm the first district manager to have started the district office. I'm one of 11. And when South Africa moved towards setting up environmental management, the fact that we had to pioneer this field over 20 years ago, for me, that passion and that appetite and thirst for wanting to make a difference in my field, it still drives me. And I'm at a juncture where I believe it's time for us to perpetuate and hand over legacy. And the thing that drives me, and I love working with young people and youth, and the thing that drives me is looking forward towards bringing the young, fresh leaders into this space and to nurture and to groom them. That's what excites me and drives me. So that's what I look forward to, Dr. Nick.
Thank you. So let's talk about leadership, Vanessa. And I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
Leadership to me, if I could coin a phrase, it would be bridging the divide. It would be bringing together of a multi-diverse, multi-skilled, multi-talented team, diversified, not just restricted to demographically speaking, but diversified in skills, diversified in talent, diversified in creativity. To me, the future of leadership is not about age anymore. Remember my early days in my career, I started out in the apartheid government. And back in the days, I know what it was like to be limited as a young novice in entering as a young novice scientist in that field. One of the things and my observations back in the day, and a promise I made to myself, was that when I become a leader and a manager one day, I will never forget that I was not born into this position and that I must groom myself and likewise groom others. So the future of leadership to me is all about building bridges. It's about the experienced mind rubbing shoulders with the young mind, and also knowing that as a leader, learning never stops. It is a continuous process and a two-way flow stream, a circular flow stream, and that you really have something to offer even when you are giving back. To me, being a leader is not about holding to yourself what you have experienced in life. To me, the thrill and the greatest pleasure I get out of being a leader is to see someone else rising up further than you ever could, and knowing that you played a small part in nurturing and grooming that individual or that team. That's what, to me, the future of leadership is, and that's the vision I have for the future of that.
And Vanessa, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
For me, first and foremost, Dr. Nick, there's no room for laziness and there's no room for entitlement. You really have got to work hard. Hard work does pay, and laziness will only find you lagging behind. And high moral integrity, honesty, I believe the foundation of a good and a strong leader must be built on sound moral values. I'm a firm believer in self-discipline, and I'm a firm believer in introspection. I do believe that, and you hear me say this often, you are not born into a position of leadership, and your title does not define you. It is who you are and your character that will really take you through this journey of being a leader. And the most important thing a leader can do is say sorry and apologize when you've made a mistake. Say those things like, I don't know. This is new to me. Can you perhaps enlighten me? That inclusiveness really, to me, has been very important in my own journey. And I do believe that honesty and integrity and working with clean hands is what makes one sleep well at night. So it's all about your conscience.
Right. And tell us, Vanessa, when it comes to social media, what is it you tell aspiring leaders? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
Social media, I believe, is an excellent platform to showcase leaders, young up-and-coming leaders, all sectors of leadership. And to me, if I had to give an advice on how one should build their personal brand, I would say be true to yourself. Use that space to show the real you. At the same time, never forget that you must be very respectful, that there are people that will have diverse views, may oppose the position you hold. That's okay. You are not about proving right or wrong, but you're about branding. And so maximize that opportunity to truly reflect your thoughts, share your aspirations, and remain current on topical issues. If you have a view, research your view, base it on a solid argument, and open yourself up to allow your position and your standpoint to create even a greater impact even on yourself, so that that is how you will grow personally and allow your branding to grow you as well, whilst being noticed out there. That to me is what I maintain to be the pivotal criteria that one should consider when branding oneself in the social realm.
Right. And Vanessa, what is your advice for future leaders? What are the challenges, some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
Future leaders, number one, the greatest challenge would be that we are learning to accept that you are getting into a space where people are forerunners and may have already pioneered or have lots of experience tucked under their belt, and that future leaders will be like a salmon swimming upstream. Have fortitude and tenacity to be able to swim against the current without losing who you are and your core values. At the same time, I also believe that another challenge is, there may not be room enough for you at the old boys club around that boardroom table, but that's okay. Put your head down and grow yourself and learn your space and learn your field. And know this from my own experience. My advice to the future leader would be that, yes, it will be a challenge, but challenges can be turned into stepping stones if you would look at that as a challenge that you need to overcome. Like an athlete, someone trying out for a triathlon. They're not going to run their comrades marathon or that race when the gunshot is fired. No, there's a lot of behind the scenes work. So the greatest challenge I see for a young leader is embrace yourself if you are limited in inclusivity. And my advice would be, you can hold your own and your work will speak for itself. So the more you humble yourself and do your work with the utmost of diligence, go the extra mile. Don't expect a pat on the back. Don't expect someone to notice you or to say thank you. But people will come looking for you when your work starts blowing its own trumpet. That to me is the best advice. The diligence and the hard work when a task is given. Always report back on that task. If you're unclear about that task, ask. So what is it that you require me to do? Is it this, that, and that? Or would you like me to go an extra step? And you would find that by engaging and asking those meaningful questions, you would also be assisting a leader in a very high profile position who didn't think to break down the steps of the work instruction given to you. And therein lies the secret of how you can then be advised and guided to complete your task. And the most important fundamental principle in executing any task. The task is not done until you go back to the person who gave you that task to ask that person, are you satisfied? Is this now the completion of my task, or is there anything? That feedback loop is very critical. And that to me is a skill that I would really encourage young leaders to focus on, and know that you are going to do all of your learning on the job. If I were to give a nugget of advice, all your accolades and your degrees mean nothing. Literally, put it on a shelf and know that the greatest learning is going to be with your work boots on, rolling up your sleeves and learning on the job. That's my take on that, Dr. Nick.
And Vanessa, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Dr. Nick, upcoming leader that took my advice to heart is none other than my firstborn. Very early in my own career, I found myself divorced and raising two beautiful young girls. And 29 years later, I have watched and I hear daily my firstborn holding a very key position in leadership. She works for Microsoft Azure, who deals with the cloud development. And so she's in the IT sector. And oftentimes I hear her quote, "But Mom, I've learned this from you, but Mom, you really inspired me." And some of the things that in not realizing that she was actually learning from my very own example. Some of the things like her flexibility and her discipline and her great avid passion for not being limited to just a structured degree. For example, she's multi-skilled and talented in her field, widely read. And I've seen her go far beyond the reaches and realms I ever envisaged for her as a parent. So to me, that is my greatest success story. I might add also that my youngest also has taken a leaf out of my book and started her degree in architecture and now studying her second degree. She's now in the environmental sector and she's studying her second degree. I've seen both my girls whom I've mentored and nurtured. I've seen both my girls, 22 and 29 years of age, being able to really hold their own in their own space and really visionaries in their own careers and very, very strong leaders. So to me, that's my greatest success story.
Well done, Vanessa. And tell us, are there any role models of leadership that you encountered in your career and maybe in your learning journey that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
Dr. Nick, as I mentioned earlier, coming from an apartheid era and being so privileged and blessed to work in the new democracy, to me, our late President Nelson Mandela will always and forever be the iconic epitome of a true leader, of someone that showed what forgiveness can do in bringing healing to a nation, someone that embraced international leaders with such humility. He also brought in first world principles into South Africa and made it work domestically. He created such bridges of opportunity and hope. He grew the economy. And for myself, as a leader, inspired me to even go to burst my own boundaries and shatter my own limitations and believe that it was possible, that one could see transformation not as a buzzword, but a reality. So to me, he will forever remain a reference point, and in the history of South Africa and the rebuilding of our nation. Personally, there is an author that I really love, and I've read a lot of his books. Dale Carnegie. He has always been and stands out for me as an author. One of his books, and in my own young days as a young manager, the mistakes that I've made, and I've made lots of mistakes, and the conflicts and impasses that I've had. One of his books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, really is a very good reference book, and I would encourage young leaders and future leaders to grab a copy, simply because the reality in which he presents scenarios of people and how they overcame their own challenges. Note, I don't say weaknesses, challenges. And a quote that I said earlier about turning stumbling blocks into stepping stones actually comes from one of his books as well. So Dale Carnegie, he writes a number of books about conflict, about thankfulness. He wrote this book about winning friends and influencing people. To me, that will remain my number one book on my bookshelf as a go-to book for a young up-and-coming leader.
And Vanessa, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
Dr. Nick, LinkedIn for me is my go-to place if people would like to connect with me. They're welcome to inbox me, follow me, and also on my email as well, which is on my LinkedIn profile. I can give it to you now as well. It's vanessa.maclou@gmail.com, and that's also on my LinkedIn profile.
And last but not least, Vanessa, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own life?
Yes, Dr. Nick, I'd like to say to future leaders, and I'll repeat what I said earlier, a leader is not born, but a leader is groomed and shaped by others. People will shape you, but ultimately, be true to yourself. Spend time observing other leaders. My advice would be observe the highly successful leaders, but also observe those who don't quite get it right. You would find that in observing the mistakes of others, you will sensitize yourself of how not to do things. And I'm not one to advocate anything in the negative, but this is one time where I would say, if you watch someone that's failed in something, you would tell, experience is not always encouraged. If you can learn from somebody else's experience, then why go down that path yourself? Rather, grow from someone else's experience so that you don't make the same mistakes, but enhance from their mistakes that you could go a little bit further. I also believe introspection.
Yeah.
You know, always go back and do a debrief of if you behaved a certain way or you feel you're not happy with the response you got in a situation. Do some introspection and find out, where did things go wrong? Was it you? Was it your approach? Is there anything that you can change? Please, my advice and my encouragement would be to really encourage the young learner that you can't change another person, but you can change your approach to a situation. Introspection really helps in that way. And learning. You are never too old or too young to learn. Learning must never stop. The most and the greatest satisfaction you can get as a leader is not by what you take, but it's by what you give back. So know your community, know your target group, and always be prepared to give of yourself. There is someone less fortunate than yourself. Never forget where you came from. As I say again, we were not born into a leadership position, and it doesn't matter how high we go or how successful we are. There is always someone behind you, following you, waiting for your arms around their shoulders, or waiting for you to even invest in them. Put your hands deep into your pocket, invest in them. I do believe that when you invest in people, it comes with a reward and a self-satisfaction that no money, no accolades, no title can buy. And lastly, I'd like to say, whatever you do it in secret. Don't do it so that you are recognized for it, because therein lies a self-gratification that long after the curtains have closed and you are all alone, you will know that it was well and that you have really done justice to the space that you have found yourself in. And in being a risk taker, know that even from your own mistakes that you have learned and grown, so don't and can grow. So don't be too harsh and self-critical to the point where you would get yourself into a state of depression. And finally, Dr. Nick,
Yes.
there is a life outside work. Have a balance, really, really have a balance. Enjoy life, smile, laugh. You know, we only have one take in this thing called life, so live it to the fullest.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and for raising future leaders and showing us a way.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Dr. Nick. It's a pleasure.